This is Startup Series Latam, where we're about to take you on a journey through the dynamic world of Latin American entrepreneurship. In this show, we'll explore the stories of visionary founders and leading VCs who are transforming the region.
I think we're a bit ahead of time, but it was perfect because it was part of that learning journey that I think as a Latin American entrepreneur, you have to be very advanced in that vision because you don't have the tools and the funding. But sometimes we don't understand that we do need to build these tools of the future and use that power of technology and not tech-enabled. I'm talking about putting actually the power of technology in your hands for those things to happen. For me, the huge limitation and that missing link is actually having real-time information and data to have better informed decisions.
From the Alan B. Levan Innovation Center in South Florida, I'm Mariana Atencio, and this is Startup Series Latam, where we are inspiring líderes. And today we are thrilled to have Juan José Pocaterra, economist, lawyer, tech entrepreneur, founder at Vikua. Vikua helps transform cities in the emerging world into smart cities, improving urban living through data. It has been recognized by Forbes magazine as one of the top 30 most promising companies in Latin America. Juan came all the way from Venezuela to be with us today as it's going through an incredibly challenging time. And just even your journey here, Juan, underscores many of the challenges of being a founder in Latam.
But I'm glad to be here, Mariana.
From Caracas, Venezuela, bienvenido.
Gracias.
Now, you and I go way back since our days at Harvard Model United Nations at college, and I think that also is revelatory of our level of geekness.
Definitely.
But we're both very proud of that fact.
So part of the inspiration for this business, but yeah.
Really? Okay, so you'll tell me about that
Definitely.
because, you know, Vikua is truly transforming the way we live in Latin America. What does it do exactly in layman's terms for those folks who don't know it? And what inspired you to create a company that would revolutionize urban management?
Right, so let me begin by explaining to the audience what we do, right? We are an urban data analytics platform that we help city governments and businesses basically optimize city operations. And we do that by combining urban data that we collect from multiple sources. I mean, traffic information, public services, transportation networks, environmental sensors, census data and information, and we combine it with the organizational data that everyone has or these organizations have. And by harnessing the power of AI, advanced models, machine learning, and some advanced analytics, we provide actionable insights for them. So it's basically a way for them to understand what has happened, understand their businesses or organizations or the performance of city operations, and at the same time model how that's going to work in the future based on the decisions that they want to make. So in the end, this just becomes a platform where decision makers, that means the mayor or the secretary of a given service in the city, the CEO, COO, CFO of companies, better understand the performance of their organizations, how to increase revenue, whether it's tax collection or it's a revenue of your business, how to streamline your operations and reduce costs, and at the same time model, based on all the data that we have from what's happening on the city in real time, model and understand how your decisions are going to affect that result.
This is such a current business idea, but you've been working on this for how long, and how did this idea come about for you?
Yeah, so I've always said that I think we're a bit ahead of time, but it was perfect because it was part of that learning journey that I think as a Latin American entrepreneur, you have to be very advanced in that vision because you don't have the tools and the funding. So we'll probably get into that later, but for me, the inspiration has been, as you know, my journey. I started in 2010, 2011 with my first company. It was called Grupo Intec. And what we did at the time was a traffic light management system. We created a software that based on traffic flow, data, changed traffic lights, planning and programming in order to optimize how people moved from one point to another. And that was based on the fact that Latin America was one of the regions, particularly Caracas actually, was one of the cities that had the most congestion. Just to give you a figure, in 2010, an average person living in Caracas spent over 3.28 years of their life in a car sitting in traffic.
So I spent 24 years of my life in Caracas.
So in the end, imagine how much time you're losing, how that is limiting productivity and urban and economic growth.
Right.
So we created this company. It was called Grupo Intec. We did over 21 projects in Latin America. We basically competed with the large IT vendors such as Cisco, Telvent, Siemens, that were providing these type of softwares, complex softwares for traffic light management, but they were completely unaffordable for a Latin American city. And that gave me the opportunity to travel the region and understand this problem a lot better than I think someone that doesn't have kind of that opportunity to talk with the decision makers on the ground and understand their pains.
It gave you the opportunity to have boots on the ground.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Just and I'll give you an example. I mean, I had the opportunity with Grupo Intec to travel from Oruro in Bolivia, a small city of around 300,000 people. By the way, one of the oldest carnivals in the region, to San Jose in Costa Rica, or to Manta in Ecuador, Valledupar in Colombia, Calabozo in Venezuela. These are cities, small, medium-sized cities, that are having an inflow of people coming from the rural areas into the urban areas, but they don't have the resources and the tools to understand how urban development should be and actually design urban planning, urban sprawl, in order for those services to be adequate to the needs of the people that are moving. And remember that Latin America is the most urbanized region in the world. And for me, that was a fact or a figure that inspired Vikua's job, but at the same time being boots on the ground and understanding and talking to these majors from multiple countries of different cities in Latin America, I kind of found that there was a common thread. I did not find a single decision maker that did not want to make things right. So, you know, when we think of Latin America, we think of this region that is corrupt, that people don't know exactly what to do, businesses that are either you have a large business or you have a really small business. So, and when you know people in the region, you understand that for me, the huge limitation and that missing link is actually having real-time information and data to have better informed decisions, because we don't have that here. It's common in the US to have it, or in Europe, it's not common in America.
Right. So we're talking about the most urbanized region in the planet. 80% of Latin Americans live in cities. So where did that willpower and just the conviction of saying, I can reimagine the way people live here come from? Was it something about your upbringing that inspired this entrepreneurial journey?
I mean, definitely. I would say that it's even the fact that I grew in Venezuela, was born and raised in Venezuela. As you know, we have a beautiful country. It's amazing. Super smart people. I would say even very good businessmen and people that want to make things good or right. But it hasn't happened, right? And that has many reasons that I'm not going to get into, but at the same time, I understood at that time that one of the most limiting factors is that we don't have the right tools to make the right decisions for our ecosystems. And I believe that's true in Venezuela and the rest of Latin America. So yes, in the end, when you come to see, and this is the paradox of Latin America, this is a figure that Edward Glaser, who's a famous urban economist, actually a super recommended book, it's called The Triumph of the City. He says, look, if you grow your urban population by 10%, in 10 years, you should have 3x growth of your GDP per capita. That hasn't happened in Latin America. That hasn't happened. So for me, the inspiration was, well, I could, be a researcher and try to understand why, or I could be a tech entrepreneur and using the power of technology, kind of build the tools that allows other individuals not only answer that why, but actually make those decisions that would improve services in the city. And we have many examples of that. In the end, I do believe that the most limiting thing, and that's why I called it before the missing link, the most limiting thing, kind of element for these decision makers is that you're competing with different tools, right? You don't have the same amount of resources from a monetary point of view. You don't have access to the same technologies because technologies tend to come later to Latin America than they are in other places. So you have to leapfrog. But for you to leapfrog, you need to have information on where and how to do it. Because if not, the cost of that is actually destroying value, not creating value.
And at the same time, we do have a young tech-savvy population that is ready to absorb those tools once you give it to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why I think we're so ahead on time of kind of promoting, and as you know, my journey, kind of educating on this. And it was tough at the beginning. That's why I think Vikua took more time. And now we're in the perfect spot because what we've been saying for the past 10 years, well, in the case of Vikua for the past 7, but in my personal experience and professional background for the last 10 to 12 years was, look, our cities can be smarter, right? Our cities can be better. It is true that we can achieve economic development because we have more urban population. That means that we have people that are close to each other in order to innovate and make things better, but it wasn't happening. So let's talk about the fact that if we are all looking at the same information, we should agree more, and we should actually be better at building those businesses of the future, even where you set up shop.
Right.
It matters, right? If you put a store, a mom and pop store, in the wrong place with the wrong products, you're going to lose value. And we're in Latin America, every dime counts. You know, if someone invests and that doesn't work, the cost of failure is actually higher.
And on the other hand, if that business does well, the improvements in that small ecosystem can be transformative.
It's crazy. We've seen it.
And I love that you said, like, I've been educating on this for so long, because it's no surprise that your friends and investors call you the prophet. I just saw it literally right now. You're preaching about, you know, this urban development that can really be a tangible thing. So give me some concrete examples of how Vikua is just reshaping the way we live in cities in Latam.
Right, so quickly think of 4 examples. One is how we've helped small to medium-sized cities actually increase their tax revenues. Without having tax revenue that's sustainable, it's really hard for them to do investments that change infrastructure, right? And let's remember that the Inter-American Development Bank says that we have a deficit of funding for infrastructure in Latin America that's over $1.5 trillion.
So hard to collect taxes,
It's
so hard to get people to pay taxes.
It's so hard to actually do infrastructure, right? And to deploy the right infrastructure in cities. But why? Because the resources are not there. So our thesis was, let me help you with data analytics and advanced models understand how you can increase tax revenue. And for example, in Colombia, we helped one of the cities understand that every time you did a kind of a public works maintenance operation in public parks, immediately, if you sent tax collectors about 15 days after that happened, in a span of 15 days, 11% of property tax, there was an increase of property tax collection by 11%. This was a city that grew from basically around $300 million in revenue to around $1.3 billion in revenue over the years. And the same happens in Calabozo in Venezuela. We help them understand where they are missing taxpayer information, and I mean this on the business side, so it's more business tax than it is property tax, and understand how they can help those businesses grow by providing information as a city, and then that would return and have an increase on their tax revenue. And we've managed to help that city, for example, go from $300,000 a month to $680,000. That's 2x in just a 12-month span. So that's one example of how we've helped cities on the revenue side. Another way that we've helped is we helped cities understand the impact of environmental risks and work with insurance companies to provide lower insurance premiums in cities. So basically, in one of these cities, we collected data from environmental sensors. We combined that with the data of one of the largest reinsurance companies in the country. This was in Venezuela. And we helped them model and understand how they can provide lower property insurance fees, so that in case of risks that happened, actually, that cost was less, and obviously the cost for the insurance company was less. So they were able to expand the customer base, have more people insured, and that was obviously kind of a way of doing public policy without you having to to give it for free, right?
So tax collection, insurance, you talked about businesses and giving them tangible data to say, I'm gonna open up shop here, or
retail, for example. We do help other retail chains and stores, but one that comes to mind is one of these retail companies. It was an up and coming kind of retail chain that had 10 locations in Caracas. They were looking to invest $1 million in the next 3 months, and they had locations that weren't adequate for that. They were going to invest that money in places where their clients didn't live. The customer segment that they served didn't live there. The average spending of people around that zone for the products that they sold, the mix of products that they sold, was not the adequate one. We showed them the model. They opened a store in other places where actually even their clients live, and they didn't know that. And that created a huge return, and it became one of the most successful stores that they opened. And it's because of that. If you do have information, your decisions are going to be better. And that's what we want to help people not only understand, but actually be able to do. Because again, people don't want to be wrong. It's not like people in Latin America just do not want to create wealth. But sometimes we don't understand that we do need to build these tools of the future and use that power of technology and not tech-enabled. I'm talking about putting actually the power of technology in your hands for those things to happen.
And it's just incredible the vision that you had to launch this, 7 years ago and to have been talking about this for so long. Actually, Shuniata, who is the founder of Bicycle Capital, who we also interviewed on this podcast series, he talks about 3 waves that have happened in Latin America. The first one was the wave of the Ubers of the world, let's say. The second one was the fintech wave. And now he says what's going to happen in the next 10 years is the wave of harnessing the power of AI and technology.
And that is exactly where we're at. And I do agree with that kind of wave or perspective. And it makes sense. Now we are in the process where by being early adopters of technology and adapters, because that's the Uber wave where we understood other business models and brought them into Latin America. Then fintech appeared as a great way to show how a tech-enabled business could improve people's lives in a place where bankarization and the people using different tools was not there because cash was king. And that limited access for people to services and so on. And now that we have that, for me, it's a wave of how we make these businesses, kind of take advantage of that value that has been created. And that's why, in the end, how we see it is that the process that we're doing with Vikua, in kind of putting these tools of advanced analytics, AI tools in the hands of users, but at the same time with a critical element of design, which I think it's cardinal to being a successful tech entrepreneur in Latin America, is that, for example, our tools are not built for the tech-savvy users. It's not like our buyer persona and the user persona that we tackle are not the IT departments of our clients, are the actual functional users that are making the decisions. And that's a huge challenge for us because it has to be a design on the platform that it's very understandable and agreeable and accessible.
User-friendly.
Very user-friendly. And that's a challenge that you maybe don't have to face in other parts of the world.
And let me even take this to another level. You're seeing this third wave of the use of data and AI in Latin America. Is that in the sense of Vikua also in a way coinciding with this global wave of putting behind this idea of nation states and really prioritizing more of the cities globally?
Absolutely. And that's why I think, without a single shred of doubt, that this could be Latin America's decade. We're the most urban region of the world. That means that we have a region where most people live in intermediate cities, which is a huge opportunity because that's where we can still drive change by using AI and new technologies and redesign the way that cities operate so that they become these huge enablers of wealth creation and progress. And at the same time, it is exactly this decade in which AI is kind of becoming something that everyone uses and understands, which we have to thank these technologies such as ChatGPT for doing these type of kind of evangelical spread of the tools. Well, it helps us now go deeper into that and help these decision makers kind of harness the power of more advanced tools in order for that to happen.
So what instilled this spirit in you, Juan? Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial family? Were you playing with Legos as a little kid and you're like, I want to reimagine urban life?
I was a super geek. I played with
we established that at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's true. I played SimCity for a huge time of my life. This computer game that someone's laughing here, so I agree with you. It's a very fun game. And at the same time, I think I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. My dad, who I love and admire, has been a corporate guy all his life and in multinationals. But you know what? I don't know. First, I think it was being raised in Venezuela. When you see the potential that it's not fulfilled, to me that's a huge element. And I lived the problem. I lived. You both and I lived what it means to not have adequate urban planning. How water shortages, energy shortages, lack of goods and services in the stores, how that affects people's lives. And yes, there is a political element to that. That has happened in other places too of Latin America where politics has not been the key element. So what are we missing? And I think is that drive. Maybe a little bit of the Model UN thing where you get to know the world and understand that world problems can be solved if everyone comes to the right solution. And I think a little bit of what we learned in that process or that experience is that if you provide information, the same information to everyone, leaders can agree and can come together on approving a resolution in the UN, but can come together also as leaders in a city, actually kind of driving new products, new services, delivering new transportation networks or solutions. And that's where I think we can make a difference. So in the end, I think what made me this tech entrepreneur or take this path as a tech entrepreneur, but very specific in urban development, was that I'm an economist and lawyer, as you mentioned. I think being in an economics major and then understanding the regulatory hurdles that we have to go through, you kind of understand the ecosystem that Latin America has built.
Right.
An ecosystem that's very well, I mean, it's based too much on the kind of the drive from the public sector. And someone needed to unlock value in a different way. And I think that's where data comes, because now what we're trying to bridge is that gap where there is a lot of data on the public sector that's not being shared with the private sector for different reasons. So we're collecting that in an urban repository, which I think is I'm not short of saying that it's one of the largest urban repositories of data in the region. Actually, that's why, for example, the Multilateral Bank of Latin America, CAF, invested in our second round. And then we're bringing that information and that data accessible to all these stakeholders and players for them to combine it with theirs and then understand and go from something that we call descriptive or historical analytics, which is where we are at right now in Latin America. A lot of organizations just asking, kind of having these dashboards that explain what has happened in the past, which is cool. That gives you a kind of a step into the right path. But then how can we actually do more predictive kind of cognitive analysis?
That is actionable as well.
That is actionable because you need, in the end, you cannot act on your past, but you can act on what's going to come in the future.
But Juan, still, you launched Vikua during a moment of political upheaval in Venezuela. We're talking the 2015-2017 period. What was that like?
We built a startup that always thought of Latin America as its market, not a single country.
Okay.
So that helped us because when Venezuela was not the perfect market for us, we would be working in Colombia, in Mexico, in Peru, the other countries that we operate in. And that helped us along the way. But at the same time, for us, it was a way of, keep pushing forward on the fact that if we were there, boots on the ground, as I've been throughout my 14 years of professional experience working with cities, that's where you learn about the new designs and tools. And for example, for us, the case of Venezuela was very interesting because since in the last 2 years, we've seen a bit of an economic change in terms of the micro and the microeconomics of elements in the country. We've been able to help businesses be very precise. Like I mentioned, insurance companies, banks, that now can provide better services to the underserved population, kind of that fintech approach, but to the traditional industry based on data. And at the same time, healthcare providers, which is a huge issue in our country. And we've been able to kind of design solutions for those three verticals, just because now we're seeing that we waited enough for that opportunity to come, and now we're kind of taking the advantage of that.
Well, I believe, and it's been mentioned even by Laura Gonzalez, from the Venture City, who we interviewed in the series, Latam entrepreneurs, especially coming and living in Venezuela as you do, you have to deal with some bizarre things that happen either currency-wise or politically. Take us to one of those, is this really happening moments?
No, well, one was the shortage of internet in a tech company. So you can imagine that's crazy. Fortunately, you invest and then you're able to overcome those type of things. At the same time, we built from a couple of years back, because of that reality, a team that's spread across Latin America. So we're a small team, 23 people. We try to keep it very, everyone is at the top of their productivity, not that many people, but we're spread across Latin America. So our CTO, for example, is in Portugal, which is not Latin America, but you get my drift. So we have our CTO in Portugal, we have a team in Mexico, our COO is in Colombia, so we're very well spread across the region. And the second element, which I do think is not a bizarre situation, but actually a critical situation of Latin America, is how we've developed our talent. Because in difference to U.S. kind of deep tech companies where you can go and acquire that talent and pay higher fees to talents that come from Stanford, from Harvard, from MIT, you don't have that in America. So you have to really bet on individuals and grow them along the way,
right,
and teach them new skills that they don't have. So in order to kind of overcome the reality and the limits or the obstacles that the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the region has.
And that's what Laura said. She said, the founders that I support in Latin America, they've been through such big hurdles that would destabilize a team in the US. Like, there's no internet, nobody's working today. Whereas you've said we need to be nimble enough and we need to be spread out enough so that we can continue to operate no matter what happens.
Definitely. And that wasn't a COVID thing for us. That was before. So imagine having to be kind of one step ahead just because of those hurdles that you're mentioning. And again, I think that's actually even the greatest opportunity that we have in the region, and why I call the next 10 years the Latin American decade, in the sense that we have critical problems that need to be solved. But the paradox is that those problems are very common in the global south, where most of the population lives nowadays in the world, and where the economic opportunities are. So if we are Latin American entrepreneurs delivering high-end solutions with deep tech on the back of it, and that are solving problems like transportation network efficiency, waste management collection, water distribution, or even retail kind of growth and performance.
And insurance, as you mentioned.
Insurance, as I mentioned, access to insurance, to affordable insurance, which we need.
Tax collecting, etc.
Then we are creating solutions that will stick there for the next 10 to 15 years and will change people's lives. I don't think that, and I don't have anything against people that are in that line of business, but I don't think Latin America needs more social network kind of app entrepreneurs.
Right.
We do need people that are trying to solve from the private sector the critical problems of our environments. And for me, it's specific on urban environments, but this could be also in the rural areas where agro-industrial production does need a lot of kind of technological advancement.
Talk to me about something that happens in Venezuela, and I believe most of the region as well, where tech startups usually support traditional industries, like transportation. You have made Vikua and you have made data and tech into a business in its own. How is that sort of mind shift?
Well, it is tough. That's a super good question. I mean, it's tough because even you're not prepared to understand those business models, and the market is not prepared to acquire your solutions, right? So there is a process I mentioned before of education. And that's why in the end you see me doing these conferences and kind of all the time talking everywhere I can about
You're the prophet. You're preaching,
preaching to the crowd. So in the end, it's the reason for doing that is because if people don't understand, trust cannot be built between the solution and the person that's going to use it. And the lack of trust, for me, it's one of the highest limitations for heavy technology adoption in Latin America. And that's where we have to come in. And we have to teach people that, you can continue kind of not trusting these type of solutions or thinking that you don't have to invest in that, or you can actually, do that leap of faith, start investing in these and see the change in the results of your business, your city, or the organization that you operate. And that's to me is what makes the difference. When you're able to show people that if they're willing to do that leap of faith and believe that technology can be more than just an app or more than just something that I consume, and it could be critical in my operations and can be embedded on that, then the results are going to come.
So you are already operating in several countries. Besides Venezuela, you're in Mexico, Colombia, Peru. What is the future for Vikua looking like, and what are some key considerations for expanding into these new markets?
Right, so for us, it's been 5 years of testing the different verticals in the product. So in difference to other startups that I've co-founded, as you know, it's not about high-speed growth. It has been about consistent growth over the last years. We've generated over $5 million in revenue over the last 4 years in different verticals. And why? If you come to think of the traditional journey of an entrepreneur, you try to do like a very deep dive on the vertical that you develop. Mm-hmm. So if you're, for example, tax collection software, you try to be very good at tax collection. We've taken a different approach, and I'll explain you why quickly, which is I want to have a single dot of entry in each of the different verticals that operate in a city because of the network effect that creates. for me, optimizing retail services is a way of generating tax revenue.
Of course.
If I generate tax revenue, I can invest in better public transportation. If people invest in better public transportation, more people are going to get to your store and you're going to increase revenue. So there you see the kind of
a virtuous
flywheel,
cycle.
the virtuous cycle, the flywheel loop that can be created in cities, which is to me what hasn't happened and why that figure by Edward Glaser, where we should be ahead in terms of GDP per capita, hasn't happened. So we've spent the last 4 years kind of building these use cases across multiple industries or verticals in the city, so that now in the next 5 years we can heavily invest in going deeper on each of them and acquiring a larger client base on each and in different geographies. Why? Because the end game for us is what we call building the most advanced urban generative intelligence model, which is how we can understand the horizontal perspective of the city, go deep in understanding its vertical and curating models that once you train them and feed data into them, they can help all these players no matter the location or the geography where they're at. And to us, that's the way that we are going to be able to scale to the rest of the global south.
So if I gave you a magic wand right now, what are 3 cities where you absolutely want to be?
Okay, that's good. So, and you mean Latin America or the world? It could be anything.
The world is your oyster.
Yeah, definitely. So I would love to do one city in Latin America. Hopefully it could be Mexico City, where you have, kind of a large ecosystem, large population. Has grown in the past, but
you're already operating in Mexico.
Yeah, but I mean, like if I had magic wand, where I would heavily invest and kind of put all technology across the board.
Okay.
Then I would also try to do something in Lagos in Nigeria, which is it's going to become one of the most popularized or largest population city in the world. Over 70 million is a projection they're going to be living in Lagos. That's crazy. And then Jakarta in Indonesia, I think it's the third place where if we had the opportunity. And why do I mention 3 kind of global south, different type of cities, places? Because that's where I mentioned that what we're trying to build is that model that no matter
that is applicable, that is applicable,
that it's scalable, and that could actually understand 3 different phenomena as could be Jakarta, Lagos, or Mexico City.
We're not going to start the lightning round until I need to ask you about scaling and fundraising, because it remains one of the biggest challenges for founders in Latin America. So tell me about how challenging that has been and any advice for entrepreneurs who are watching and listening.
It has been incredibly challenging because we were ahead in time. Our business model is more kind of on a research, deep tech side of process than it is of adoption and adapt app. So basically, we've only raised $2.5 million in our history, which is, I'd say only, but it's a small amount of money for the type of deep tech that we're developing. Well, we were fortunate enough that we did it in 2 waves. One was investors that were in traditional industry, so they were investor clients.
Right.
So at the same time, they allowed us to test our solutions while investing money. That was a $1 million round. And then we did a second round, which was 1.5 of strategic investors. That was a round where we not only brought global investors such as Urban Tech, one of the sponsors of your series, but at the same time, we brought in the Multilateral Bank of Latin America, CAF, and Golden Section, which is a B2B SaaS large fund here in the US. And we did that, kind of tailored and choosing very wisely, just because now we needed people that would help us kind of think of that scale. We're now on the 3rd wave, where we hope to bring kind of more sophisticated investors from the global ecosystem to understand that this is the opportunity because of what's happening right now, and you mentioned that opportunity to expand AI and deep advanced analytics into regions like Latin America.
And what would be your practical advice for entrepreneurs who are listening and are having challenges with the fundraising?
No, so first, my advice would be to build a sustainable model, just because I think that now the world where we've rationalized the fundraising process and the evaluation of companies, where now it's not growth-driven but profit-driven, makes the Latin American entrepreneur, because of resiliency and our need to actually build those models, kind of work on a unit economic perspective. So I do think that now the rationalization of what's happening in the ecosystem is going to be an opportunity for the tech entrepreneurs in Latin America that understand this to the core. And that's why my kind of advice would be keep drilling at that, even if they don't grow as fast, to keep at that and driving forward. Even if the business just generates, $400K, $500K a year, and you do it with the less cost possible, you're showing that you're capable of driving that revenue with a consistent, kind of sustainable way, and then scale. That's going to make our journey longer, and that's why I think, for example, if I could comment something for funds in the region, is for Latin America, I think you have to expand the time frame. It's not about investing for the next 5 to 7 years in a company. It's about investing for the next 10 to 12. Results and the positive outcome is going to come, but you need to stick there in that process where you're still testing and kind of developing without the amount of resources that you have in other
And
places.
that's definitely sage advice after the venture capital tourists have left the region.
Exactly.
So in brief, it's smaller but firmer steps.
And at the same time, betting on investors and understand the region. So as I mentioned before, and the type of investors that we brought in, I think it's people and institutions that understand the Latin American span. And that's why my advice to entrepreneurs is bring the institutional investors that have that time frame and that mentality into your cap table.
So I can't let you go, Juan, without doing our Latino lightning round, how we finish every show. Are you ready?
Ready.
¿Estás listo?
Ready.
Okay.
Voy con todo.
What is one word that best describes your entrepreneurial journey?
Resilience.
Which trend, country, or industry in Latam are you most excited about right now?
AI.
Who in the business most inspires you, dead or alive?
That are alive. I would say Elon Musk.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, I could say I'm a tech entrepreneur. And
If you could solve one problem in Latin America with a snap of your fingers, what would that be?
it would be poverty.
What's your favorite Latin American saying or saying in Spanish?
Wow. That's a good one.
Cualquiera que se te
No, yo
ocurra.
creo que Dios no le da cacho a burro.
Can you please explain that to
How come
our
you can't say
audience?
that?
I have no. God doesn't give horns to
To a
a.
donkey? All right, so do you want me to explain
Please,
why?
please go.
Yeah.
Please do it.
Well, because I think that in Latin America, you're taught, because of the reality, that you have to work it out for yourself, and it's not, no one's gonna, give you all that you need. You're kind of a donkey that needs to build your own horn.
God ain't gonna descend from the heavens and give you
It's not.
what you need.
That's what we learn in Latin America. So you have to make it for yourself.
Bueno, my mom always says, constantly in our household, Dios dijo, ayúdate que yo te
Que yo te
ayudaré.
ayudaré, exactamente.
Okay, last question. Your top Latin American song to unwind after you've had a pretty stressful
wow.
work day?
You're putting me on the spot here. It's Frío Frío, but the combination
De Juan Luis
de
Guerra.
Juan Luis Guerra with Romeo Santos. I'm a strong bachatero, even despite my geeky
Demeanor.
tech entrepreneur and demeanor. I love bachata, so I'm a very Latino in that sense. So yes,
Wow.
it's Frío Frío. I love it. I just put it in my house. My kid, he knows my kid is 3 years old. He listens to it with me, and it's crazy.
I have a hard time envisioning you doing a little bachata step,
Yeah.
but maybe that's for season 2 of the
That's for
series.
season 2, definitely.
Thank you so much, Juan.
Thank you,
Un millón de
Mariana.
gracias.
We
Lo
did it.
máximo.